Right. Well, welcome back to the Blazing a Trail podcast after a brief hiatus. A slight shift in focus now, and this block of episodes is going to focus on businesses who have implemented Salesforce and at varying stages of their Salesforce journey. And we'll sort of have a general discussion about how they've gone about their implementation, challenges that they face, and potential recommendations for other businesses implementing Salesforce or generally going through digital transformation. Without further ado, I'm delighted to be joined by Alastair, who's the Salesforce Manager at the Access Group. Thanks for joining, Alastair. Do you want to give a little bit of an overview of yourself and the Access Group for those individuals who haven't come across them previously?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. So I'm Alastair. I'm the Group Salesforce Manager at Access. I've been at Access just over 3 years now. Came through an acquisition, which is a theme I think we touch on later on in this conversation. I've been working in Salesforce or on Salesforce technology now for over 10 years in various roles across software. And this particular role is a really interesting one. Lots and lots going on, which we'll touch on a bit more during this chat. Access provides business management software to over 75,000 customers globally. It's one of these really fast growing unicorn, if you can use that term, software companies in the UK. We've grown hugely even in the last 3.5 years I've been here, with revenue numbers now touching £1 billion. So there's lots and lots going on. There's lots of projects that we're working on to make our customers more efficient and make them work with us in a way which gives them what they need. And the team internally are doing an amazing job and things that, again, I think we'll go through during this chat.
Cool. And thanks for that. In terms of like the software that you guys provide to businesses, what kind of sort of examples would people sort of see in everyday business life of that software?
Yeah, it's really broad, right? So we specialize in a lot of areas, but we're not a singular software provider. So when I say business management, that could be anything from your HR system to things like table booking services in hospitality, to ERP solutions, and even things in health and social care and legal sectors as well. So we've got a really broad range of software, with the idea being that we can be the single software provider for a business and give them everything they need in the solution on a single platform, which allows them to manage and all their data and applications in one place.
Cool. And you touched upon in your little intro, Alastair, that you've been sort of in the sort of Salesforce IT management kind of world for the last sort of 10 years. Do you want to give us sort of a little bit of a snapshot of that sort of, I guess, initial introduction into sort of Salesforce and where that sort of journey's taking you to?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's a typical question I would always ask people when I'm interviewing them, is how they get into Salesforce, right? And I think that's a shift that I've seen more and more in the last few years. If people specifically will train out of university to get a Salesforce role, whereas when I started maybe 10, 12 years ago, Salesforce wasn't a thing that a lot of people would recognize as a career opportunity. So I actually started in a role where I was selling e-learning in a business development role for a small company, and we were using Salesforce as our CRM. And Salesforce back then was a lot different. It had fewer features, but still really good. And the lady who was managing it at the time left the business, and they kind of turned around and went, me as a 20-something, not long out of university, went, you know a lot about Salesforce, you can start managing it. And I was like, oh, okay. Sounds like an interesting opportunity. And I did. I really enjoyed configuring it. And even back then, it was things like, just doing a workflow. And there's simple things like, why are we manually doing that? Let's put a workflow in. So that's where it kind of all started for me. And I did that role for a year or so, and then I moved into a slightly different role in that business where I project managed some more Salesforce projects, which were around removing paper-based registration processes that business ran. So things like exercise professionals used to be able to send in their certificates to prove that they were a qualified PT, and they used to be manually looked at, and then we had to print a certificate and send it off to them. So we digitized all that through Salesforce and through the website. And we did that for a couple of registration processes, which again, that really built my experience, not just technically, but just also understanding what the capabilities of the application was. I moved on from that business and went to a company called Thompson's Online Benefits, which was a software provider in employee benefits, as the name might suggest. And And I was there for 5.5 years, and I grew the team there from just myself. I was the only administrator when I started, so there was three of us at the point of when that business got acquired by Mercer. A very interesting journey there, because I not only ran Salesforce, but I also ran some other internal applications such as Jira and Confluence at the time. And again, it was a transition from what more can the application do rather than just the classic kind of sales process capturing orders. And we did a lot there. So we integrated into Jira. We used case management for kind of project tracking. We were looking at Financial Force, and we also implemented CPQ whilst I was there. Well, actually, at the time, it was still Brick. It was before Salesforce actually acquired it, which was very interesting at the time, because I don't know if there's probably people who might hear this. It wasn't the best, let's say. I think before Salesforce got their hands on it, they were good at selling it, but the actual capabilities of it was maybe a little lower down, a little lower down the expectation. But it provided great value, and actually, again, really making the business more efficient in the way they operated and getting more actionable data out of the application was really, really valuable. And then post the acquisition of Thompson Online Benefits to Mercer, I moved on to a company called Core HR, which was a similar company, but a HR software provider based out of Cork in Ireland. Again, I was only there for just less than a year before that business got acquired as well. But again, working with some of the people that I'd worked with at Thompson's Online Benefits, we took on a similar kind of process. So we looked predominantly in two areas: re-implementing CPQ, because they'd used a partner to implement CPQ, which isn't a bad thing, by the way, but just that particular implementation didn't work for them. So we had to re-implement CPQ to make sure that worked for the business. And we also implemented for them at the time Pardot marketing automation to allow them to really have that seamless kind of like lead to cash journey through the application. And yeah, in February 2020, we got acquired by the Access Group. And I was fortunate enough at the time there was a position available which suited me down to the ground. And that's kind of where the Access journey started. It was me and two Salesforce admins at the time for an application, an implementation, should I say, it was large at the time. It's even larger now. So I would say we were probably a bit under-resourced at the time, and not being able to we were more of a support function rather than a transformation function. Whereas now, over the last kind of three years, we've really changed that balance, and we're definitely now more of a transformation function than just a support function.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what was sort of, I guess, the initial state of Salesforce when you first joined or first shifted across to Access?
Yeah, no, I would say it was good but underutilized, and I think that's more of a symptom of what it was initially used for, and maybe it was used initially for sales, and then it was used for service, and in those two things worked fine. But it was like, what more could we do for it, and how much further could we go? The standard, problem that everyone has around data existed and still exists. It's not. I don't think anyone can ever say that their data is in perfect shape, but there's typical things like that. And then I guess the one thing that was really noticeable then, and is being actioned and has been actioned over the last few years, is actually how scalable was that solution, because of how the business really grows. What have we got integrated in? How do we use it? What things are built in the system that allow it to be able to scale effectively with the business? Because we were onboarding more than 100 users a month during that period and putting more and more data into the system from acquisitions, and there was more and more load going through it, which meant actually it became a bit creaky. There's lots of technical debt. And because of the speed in which the business ran and the low resource levels, it didn't really allow us to maintain, manage, and upgrade things that people might not look at, workflow rules, at the time process builders, flows, triggers, these kind of things that do need a level of maintenance and review from time to time was never done. And that was true even before I joined Access, right? So there was a lot of that in the system. So even though, yes, for the outwardly from the operational side, it worked, it gave them what they needed, but there were signs that actually, we could, one, do more, but two, that we needed a good, let's say, spring clean of the system, just to make sure that it was in good shape going forward.
Yeah. And how did you sort of go about, I guess, shifting the mindset of say Salesforce internally from being that support based sort of function, if you like, to that, to sort of more transformation enhancement, sort of increasing sort of utilizability of Salesforce and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there's a level of managing up in that scenario, right? Because I guess you need the right people to be able to get the ear of and explain to them what the capabilities are. So one of the key things for me was actually using Salesforce themselves to make sure that we could interact with the right level of business to explain the capabilities. Because as lots of these people will find is, you're using it for a certain function and you're kind of happy for what it does. But you will have people within the business that recognize maybe gaps in business process or ways in which things can be done more efficiently. But actually decisions need to be made, and commitment, buy-in, that actually these things take time, they cost money, and therefore what's the return on the investment in that? So that's something you've really got to push when you're in those scenarios. But we use Salesforce a lot to kind of support on that, to say, look, we know we have these capabilities in here, and we're not really talking about, in some scenarios for sure, like additional licensing, but it's more about what are the capabilities and how can we resolve certain problems. And actually just managing up and getting I would say the ear of the right people internally allowed us to be able to do that and get their buy-in and explain what we could do. And one thing we did do, and we still do today, in a lot of scenarios, is we tend to run smaller proof of concepts for something. Rather than trying to go, hey, here's your big business case on everything it's going to solve, we solve it on a smaller scale and say, look, how much value we're getting out of it in this particular area, in this scenario. And then that gives them a tangible thing to be able to see. And they go, okay, well, actually, I get that now. Let's see how we can roll this out further.
Yeah. And how sort of receptive has the business been to those kind of things? And it sounds like you say more proactively approaching sort of key level stakeholders rather than them coming to you being like, oh, I want to do this and this and this. Like, can Salesforce do this?
It's completely shift now, right? There's very much way more of that now. Lots of people come to us all the time saying, probably too much now, saying like, I want to do this, I want to do that, which is great. It's great to have that kind of appetite in the business that they want to be able to do things, and they recognize not just the application, but our team, the team that can help deliver that for the business, which is great. But yeah, like I said, 3 years ago, it was maybe a bit more of a difficult sell. But now we're in a position where we have, people in positions in leadership, which, recognize the value of the technology. They've seen the changes that we've done over the last kind of 3 years and the value that's already driving. And they can also see the speed in which we can deliver those things as well to really get the value early, which is a key thing for Axis, is the speed in which we can do it. Some things do take time, and that's, true of lots of projects, but there's certain things that actually we can turn around quite quickly, which start delivering value immediately. So yeah, we've got lots of, let's say, stakeholders around the business who now come to us directly. Well, I don't want to say daily, but it feels like daily, but daily saying, what about this? What about that? And the latest one, which I'm sure everyone who went to World Tour will be, very, very cognizant of, is the AI kind of conversation, which, is on our agenda and radar. However, I'd say for us particularly that we're still very much wanting to do the basics well, get those things, get the processes in the business in a good shape so we can really scale it properly before, let's say, plonking AI on top of what might be there already. So we've got like a robust data set to be able to run that off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's been a constant theme for a while now. Everyone's kind of talking about AI as a buzzword, and it's kind of like, we should be doing AI, or we should be doing data, and it's like, what do those things actually mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, anyone who's kind of seen it, it's like, put AI in, and it's like, yeah, that's cool, but to do what? What do you want to do? Like, yeah, like we can't just plonk it on and just see what happens. So yeah, there's lots of that, and I think it's great because there's excitement and appetite to be able to do those things, and there's capability coming. And like I said, for us, I think just the robustness in our data set, I think we just want to make sure that we're really comfortable that what it's going to deliver out of the box would give us value from it. And it's not just value for our customers, it's also value for us internally, and to make sure that our teams that manage the system daily can actually become more efficient in the way that they work. Because I think that, for me, we're a big business. We've got lots of people using it. We've got over 4,000 people on the application now, and actually how can we make those guys more effective in the way that they work on a daily basis, which, has a knock on a positive impact to our customers. But how can we do that to make them more efficient and make them feel like they're getting value from the system as well, making their lives not easier but more productive?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You touched upon a couple of things there earlier, in terms of, say, involving stakeholders in sort of Salesforce as sort of users, and then sort of kind of showing them sort of via that as them as a user, sort of the benefit that it can add, and also smaller, say, proof of concepts in say smaller business areas, and demonstrating sort of the value that can be brought there, and then sort of potentially sort of scaling that to other areas of the business. Are they sort of your, I guess, two sort of key takeaways, if you like, for getting that sort of senior level sort of buy-in, if you like?
It is. I think that certainly helps if you're able to do it right. I don't think that's necessarily applicable across all situations and scenarios, but certainly from a strategy perspective and how we want to deliver that, it's a lot easier to, justify doing something or getting budget for something if it's on a smaller scale initially, because obviously naturally there'll be nervousness of going, hey, we want to roll out this thing to 1,500 of our users across the application, and by the way, we need a license for each one of them to be able to do it. Whereas if we go, hey, we've got an agreement where we can do it in this small 20 person section in one of the divisions, they're the ones that's going to, we see an immediate need for. It's a much easier kind of conversation to have, and actually proving that business case early on those things, and doing it on a smaller scale means quicker time, quicker speed to value, because we can do those things more quickly, not just from the implementation of technology, but actually the enablement and rollout. And then just, like you say, showing that value, let's say upwards, up the chain, becomes an easier conversation, and you've got tangible proof and evidence that what you're doing is the right thing. And then it's much easier then to say, hey, we should do this across the rest of the business. And it's almost like of course, why wouldn't we do it kind of conversation at that point.
Yeah, no, makes sense. You said, you mentioned earlier as well about the fact that when you joined, you were sort of very under-resourced as a Salesforce team. Sort of what sort of resources did you sort of put in play to be able to deliver sort of some of the projects that you sort of touched upon, and sort of how do you go about acquiring those resources?
Yeah, so I'd say I've personally learned a lot in that space over the kind of last 3 years, because it's not an area that I've had to do lots in the past. I've had to hire the odd person here and there, but actually hiring a large team of different capabilities and skill set to be able to support what the business needs is completely new. So I've got a lot of support from internal stakeholders and my management and HR to be able to kind of help shape what that looks like. But equally using third party implementers and partners and resourcing partners to kind of support what that kind of those roles would look like has really been helpful. So kind of explaining the challenges, understanding the kind of roadmap of activity that we'd be working on, and what the types of roles would be most suitable. Now, some of them are really obvious for sure, but some of them are less so, and actually getting that kind of like more tailored experience, rather than just going, hey, I need a BA. I might need a BA, but actually I need a BA who's more technical, so like a technical resource BA, and there can be a difference. So having that kind of flexibility and conversation to be able to kind of almost narrow down that scope of that role even more to a specific type of person has been really handy. Now for us, I think talking about the roles that we've hired and how we've done that over the last few years, it's been definitely a shift from a typical, like, we're an application with some administrators just managing the software, like I said, to actually a team that needs to transform and implement new features and have ideas and solutionizing those kind of things. So even though we administrators are kind of like the lifeblood of the application for sure, the day-to-day, the declarative kind of work, we have those, and we need those guys all the time. But actually having maybe let's say a more technically minded resource, so developers, solution architects, technical BAs, has given us that kind of breadth of capability. And then when we talk about some of the specialist areas we're looking at, of course, from a CPQ perspective, we need resource that understands and knows CPQ, and then that resource is definitely has been a challenge to find, but I'm finding more and more of those people now available, or at least not available, but at least I'm seeing more people with that kind of experience, which is great. Um, and for us, it's a big implementation, and actually getting the right people in is key to make sure that we can manage it. But then also we use third parties as well to implement where we need to, so we can kind of flex that resource model as we require. So we have contractors in role for short periods of time. We also use that a couple of third parties if we need to kind of, let's say, outsource a project at the right time as well.
Yeah, and how do you make that sort of call, if you like, on this resource being onshore, offshore, permanent contract, sort of via a third party or an internal resource, or what sort of the thought process, if you like, around that?
Some of it, yeah, some of it's driven by the business need at the time, or let's say where the business is at. So I think I mentioned to you earlier, we're definitely seeing a bit more of a shift towards a like a burst resource model, because even though at the moment we've got a great core of like permanent staff internally, we're doing a lot of projects at the moment that we know are temporary projects, and therefore we're not necessarily going to need lots of permanent staff to kind of support and run that for a long period of time. So we're definitely seeing that at the moment. In terms of kind of like offshoring with partners and things like that, it really depends on the project. So we've got like a long-standing relationship with a partner that we do implementations with, and they're really great and they support us in lots of ways. But that's predominantly around our customer portal, the Experience Cloud, let's say, and they've done a lot of work on that in the past, and they've got a good underlying knowledge of that build, the application that's there, the processes that sit behind it, and our internal team. They've got a good relationship with them, so using it becomes an easier decision when we go, actually we've got a core project going on in the portal, we may use our partner to be able to support some of that. But a lot of it at the moment is we are kind of burst resourcing contractors in, and a mix of permanent staff and contractors working on those projects together.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of sort of delivery of both, I guess, sort of the support function and sort of project-based work as well, what sort of have you found to be sort of the biggest challenges to ensure that that's a sort of successful delivery?
It is definitely a balance, right? So my remit, like you say, spans across supporting the application day to day and running kind of BAU activities, and anything, I would say BAU, we call them small change requests. So we need a new pick list value, or, we need help with this data load. Can you support us with that? So we have a team that's dedicatedly focused on kind of maintaining those kind of requests. But we also have, like say, I wouldn't say the transformation team, but the team that generally work more on the transformation programs. And one of the key things for us is making sure that we have agreement with the business about what we're delivering over a period of time, so that we have a good view of what that roadmap looks like, so that when we're getting more requests in and they fall into what we call our demand bucket, so we've got more demand, the business wants to deliver this, and it's not part of the roadmap, then the conversation is more about the capacity we have in the team and how we can kind of flex that or move priorities around to accommodate new requests, because a new request, even though it might be new, might have more value in something that is kind of on the roadmap to be delivered. So there's a constant review of those priorities and what they look like at any one point in time. For me, the success of it comes down to how we really enable the people to use the application, and I think that's something that, again, still talking honestly, we've maybe not done well enough in the past, and we need to work more on that. Is, we're implementing lots and lots of new things, but how do we properly enable the business and the users and the customers to make sure that they understand what those features are and they can get value from them? And that's going to be a real focus for us over the kind of next 12 months, is to narrow down that model, so that actually at the end of a delivery cycle, we've got a core process and a consistent process to enable whatever we're doing, rather than it being kind of ad hoc depending on the project team who's doing what kind of approach. That for me is something that I think does make or break a delivery, because you can implement the best kind of process or software in the world, but if people don't really know what you're doing it for, the value they're going to get from it and why, then it doesn't really mean a lot. So that for me, I think, is something that we do more of. And I would say for anyone thinking of those things, it should always be front of mind when you're thinking about taking on a project.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, just jumping back to, I guess, sort of more of a theme around resources, because you guys, from memory, have got a little bit of an unusual structure in that obviously it's completely normal for businesses and resource to be split up between sort of support and more project-based work. But I think you guys, like your team, sort of split up by sort of product almost internally, in terms of sort of people focused on, say, Service Cloud and other people focused on Sales Cloud and that kind of stuff. What was the sort of the thought process from your side, like around that, and how's that work for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be, is probably where I should start with that, right? It's not anymore. It used to be because it's almost kind of what was inherited, if I'm being honest. So when I came into the business, I had, like I said, there was two administrators. One was the Sales Cloud administrator, one was the Service Cloud administrator, which I think, for a certain scale is fine. But even at that scale, it doesn't really work that well, because you don't have any coverage. You're not, the people in the team aren't cross-skilling well enough to be able to effectively manage each area. And I try to make sure, Salesforce is an application. It's one platform, Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Revenue Cloud, it's an application that does all these features. And actually, as a professional in that area, you should have a breadth of knowledge across it to be able to manage it. Now, it becomes easier in a bigger team where actually you might have specialists in certain areas. So, of course, we have some CPQ specialists, but again, we're looking to cross-skill that capability into kind of like the admin team and even into the development team, to make sure that people have a base knowledge of understanding about how that part of the system would work and how it does work. And I think it's really important to make sure that we have that kind of breadth. So we don't have specific roles for clouds anymore. We have your Salesforce, and that's what you do. And therefore, if you feel like you're weak in a certain area, we'll support that individual to make sure they got the training and support and just mentorship, because we've got a big team now with lots of kind of technical knowledge, mentorship with the right people, so that cross skill and knowledge transfer can be done effectively.
Yeah, and I think that's also beneficial, not for you, obviously, exclusively you as a business and sort of obviously cross-skilling those individuals, but obviously for the individual themselves and sort of their retention, essentially, because if they're purely focused on one area or one product area of Salesforce, they're probably going to get bored relatively swiftly, and they want to get exposure to different areas, and they might see that being outside of access or whatever business they're working for rather than internally, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's something we are doing, and it's something I'm proud of in terms of like how we kind of encourage people from within the business. So there's a particular member of the team that didn't even work in the Salesforce team when I first started. They were in a operational function somewhere else in the business, and they expressed an interest to come into the team, and we supported that individual, onboarded them in as a junior role. They've been promoted already. They've done their Salesforce certification, their training and learning for other certifications as well. And I think as long as the appetite is there from the individual, because I'm one of these people that will say, we'll support you in your learning and what you want to look at, as long as you're engaged to do it. So I'm not going to force anyone to kind of go off and do things they're not interested in and don't want to do. But our team is very much open to say, hey, look, we've got all these things, we've got CPQ, we've got MuleSoft, we've got, all these clouds and all these people that know so much about it. What do you want to learn? The world is your oyster, really, sitting within this team. You've got people who you can ring up now and ask them questions. So we're very open just to allow people to kind of explore what they want to explore. If we got the opportunity for them to do so, we'll put them on certain projects so they can learn things they don't work on a day-to-day, so they get that breadth of experience. And I think that helps, like you say, with the retention, making it more interesting and just giving them a good kind of base understanding of the platform as a whole, which makes them a better member of staff ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've nicely touched upon a couple of sort of factors there that wasn't sort of really the natural purpose of this episode, but is super, super important when delivering projects is retaining sort of people that you hire. You've touched upon what sort of skills at the minute might be a little bit easier to come by, and there are sort of people getting more and more experience with things such as CPQ. These individuals still are quite sort of tricky to find. So the successful delivery of projects is going to be impacted if you're continually churning staff and losing individuals through not offering training or offering them other areas of exposure as part of the product suite. So two really, really important things that you've touched upon there.
Yeah, completely. And I think, you'll always have, and I guess one thing you've got to make your peace with, especially when you've got a large team, you'll always have people that periodically leave the team, right? Particularly in the nature of what we do. Salesforce is a highly sought after role. There's lots of, jobs around that people will find interesting, and there could be variations of those roles that us as a business we just don't do, and that person might find interesting, and therefore we can't really give them that. But broadly within what we have, we have a broad range, and like you say, keeping it interesting, making sure there's variety in what they're working on, and it's not just the same thing day in day out. I think gives that kind of level of comfort that that person's getting more value from the role, other than just their paycheck at the end of the month. They're getting their knowledge, their experience, and what they want for their future as well.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I am going to throw you a little bit of a curveball here, even though I said that I wouldn't, because I didn't sort of put this in our preset list of questions. But I know you guys, as well as a business, or particularly your team, are pretty much sort of remote. I know that's a topic of conversation that's been boring people to death over the last sort of few years. But what are your sort of necessarily thoughts on sort of the remote working piece, but sort of how have you sort of found that as sort of managing a team that are majoritively remote? You don't get, say, masses and masses of sort of face-to-face sort of contacts with and sort of what advice would you give to other businesses sort of around that, when people are talking about remote versus sort of being in office and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So for me personally, it's very mixed, right? So home working has so many benefits. I've got two young kids. It means my wife works from home predominantly as well. It means we can balance things like that, and that's true of everyone who kind of got that level of flexibility. But you equally, on the flip side, you can miss the interaction, you can miss the conversations you might have. I don't want to say the old cliche of the water cooler conversation, but that's it's true, right? You miss those kind of conversations. So when I do go to offices, I find that interaction with people energizing. I find it interesting. You hear things that you wouldn't normally hear because you're speaking to people that you don't bump into all the time. So I think having a blend is important. And what we try to do predominantly is make sure that we have things like, where we're having workshops, we will try and do it in a physical location if we can, because it means actually you can interact, you can have conversations, you can go out for lunch. Just that general team building kind of atmosphere, I think, is important. But then the working remote thing, right? I say from a team perspective, it gives me, particularly selfishly, a bigger market of people to pull from. I can't. By the way, we've got two offices. You've got to go into that office 4 days a week, 5 days a week, and if they're not from there, then you've lost a big proportion of people. So we have people across the country in various locations. It works really well. We're all used to doing things like this on phone calls, and I think during COVID, the business shifted really well to that remote working kind of mindset, and the internal team turned things around super quickly, so everyone had what they needed and the technology they need to be able to do their roles, and it's just kind of carried on, right? And we have offices that we call like hubs, and we've got like nice hub offices where people go to, and people who live locally will go to there. But equally, people work remotely. Like I said, my team, anywhere from Manchester, Birmingham, Bournemouth, we're all over the country. But then equally, we now have got Romania, we've got people in APAC. So being able to do this kind of thing and interact like this is important when you're working globally anyway. So actually, it's a shift that supported our expansion of the team globally, because we're so used to doing it this way.
Yeah. Nice. Let's shift on to that acquisition piece as well that you touched on a little bit earlier, and access sort of as a business and continuing to do so, making a number of sort of acquisitions. What kind of sort of approach do you take with sort of these new businesses and integrating them sort of onto your sort of systems and platforms, and how do you sort of ensure that that's fairly painless and reasonable amounts of success?
We acquire, I'd say, I use the term a lot, but anywhere between probably 10 and 20 other businesses each year, and those acquisitions are generally to support growth in our division, in our divisional business, to make sure that we've got the capability to offer our customers the kind of software that they're kind of asking for and need, to allow us to be able to kind of expand those areas. When it comes to actually onboarding those divisions, so I've had first-hand experience of it, because I came from one of those acquisitions, and that's true of a lot of people at Access, which is really nice nice to see, actually, because you see lots and lots of people that come into the business are from those acquisitions. So I think last year alone, I think we did over 1,000 people that were from acquisition. Anyway, the process has drastically improved, let's say, since I was involved in being part of one of those people that was acquired and moved over. But equally, it's kind of shifted in its mindset again, because pre-COVID, we used to go to physical locations. Now, I'm not talking from experience here because I wasn't here at that time, but from what I speak to people about, is actually we sent a team of people to their office and we sat with them for 2 weeks, which is a really nice way of doing it and just going through their business process and understanding. But again, as we acquire bigger businesses and more of them, that's not practical. From a migration perspective, it really comes down to what capability does that business have and how can we support what they need. It comes down to what the business, and I say the business access, almost want to do with that acquisition. So, by the way, they've got 10 core business processes that they run. How can we translate those into our access business process? Is it feasible? Is it sensible to do that? But generally speaking, that's a thing that can be done. If it's not done, we leave them alone, essentially, because we've bought that business because they're a business that runs well. It's a business that we want to retain. We don't want to interrupt the way that they operate just for the sake of getting them onto a centralized process. So we have a couple of acquisitions, let's say, that are still running independently on other systems. So they could be a Salesforce instance, it could be a Zuora, it could be anything really. It really depends. But typically speaking, we do a data migration process, and again, we work with a partner to do this. So we have a core team who deliver that M&A data migration. They, like I said, they go through and they pick out where there might be challenges, but generally speaking, it's a data migration onto our core applications. And then we go live with certain things over a period of time. So that might be support, for example, or it might be the sales process gets onboarded afterwards as well. And one of the core things, again, I'll touch on it because we spoke about it earlier, is the enablement of those people. And I think it's even more important in that scenario when you're acquiring a business, because it's an uncertain time, and actually what we want to do as a business is make sure those people feel welcome. They've got what they need to do their job. They don't feel they're being left in the dark, and that access is a nice place for them to work. So again, that's a really, really key bit of that process to make sure that we're not just, dropping people and going, hey, you're doing this today, off you go, log in and try and work it out. It's good amounts of training, documentation, videos, sessions to make sure those people feel really well equipped to be able to carry on what they were doing, and they're really informed about the timeline. So it's kind of like, you log off on Friday, and then when you come in Monday, you log in over here, and this is where your data will be. It will be there, and we have training environments, we have kind of staging environments where they can see that ready to go, so they feel confident and comfortable that when they do that, it's going to be what they need it to be.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've got a really good approach there, and sort of firstly, obviously not having that blanket wide rule of like every business is adopting our processes and our systems, and this is what you're going to be doing moving forward, whether you like it or lump it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Understanding that Salesforce or whatever it may well be might not be the right tool or platform or product for that particular business, but if you feel that it is, then obviously showing that the value to those individuals and ensuring that they've got the right support to then transition onto those systems.
Yeah, and some of it's just not sensible to do, right? And like I said, we don't want to, as a business, we don't want to interrupt. The worst thing we can do is say, hey, why haven't you performed as well this month? And it's going, well, hey, because you took most of the stuff that we were doing away from us and we can't do it. So that's a big no-no. Then what we do in those situations is that we make sure that we can, over a period of time, it might not be done instantly, but we make sure that actually the core reporting and the operations from that side are kind of joined up. So we've had instances where we have integrated two Salesforce environments together to make sure that we can get visibility of all that data in one place. So the reporting, when it comes down to kind of like pipeline revenue reporting, things like that, is all in one location. Even though they're working off two various applications, it's centralized reporting for the business to make sure they're not having to amalgamate reports in different formats and those kind of things.
Yeah. So I mean, it's obviously, it sounds like there's loads and loads going on with you guys, and you've mentioned various different products sort of through your sort of journey as well. I guess sort of how far has sort of Salesforce come at Access since you sort of made that move across to where it is now?
Yeah, I say I mean, it's come on a huge way, right? And there's, we do way more on it. We've got more people using it. We're onboarding different areas of the business who may not have traditionally used it before for things like case management, so even sales tracking processes like that. One of the key kind of transitions that I'm seeing, now and in the last kind of 6 to 12 months is it's changing from more of a business operational tool, something that we would use to run our business internally, to more of now of almost a customer experience tool. We're looking at ways in which we can make sure customer can self-serve a lot of the information that they might ask from us. So we have a customer portal, which again has traditionally been a product support portal, but over the kind of next 6 to 12 months, that's going to transition very much from a product support to let's say a customer experience portal, where it's not just your support cases you go in and see. It'll be things like, I want to find my contract, I want a copy of my invoice. In the future, even I want to be able to buy 2 additional modules for my product that I've got. How can we self-serve that? Because we have a huge amount of customers, over 75,000, and the value of the contract to each of those customers can vary wildly, but a lot of them are a kind of small contract value, small orders, transactional, repeat business that actually we could self-serve that, and it removes a lot of operational burden behind the scenes for us internally, but it also gives the customer instant kind of reward and gratification and ease of access for the things that they would otherwise have to ask a person or have to ring up an email or raise a case to get that information. So that's very much a focus for us, is making the experience for our customer a lot better over the next 12 months and giving them more and more ability to be able to get a lot of that information themselves. So it's definitely a huge shift that's happening, and there's lots of activity going on. Things like the CPQ project behind it really supports that. We can't allow a customer to self-serve and buy additional modules if we don't have things like the stock level or SKU data coming through CPQ and in the contract data behind the scenes to be able to do that. So if we're not doing that, we can't, it's a dependent knock-on effect. We can't actually offer that service. So all these things kind of support that. And for us, the really key thing is just making sure the customer enjoys and finds the interactions with us consistent and easy. And that's what we're going to be doing over the next 12 months.
Yeah. And you've mentioned that obviously a lot of focus on customer experience over that sort of next 12 months. In sort of the last few years, you might have some sort of measurable data and statistics, but has it sort of has it impacted Access sort of from a, I guess, customer retention perspective, additional sales, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, just the whole application landscape, and Salesforce for us is at the center of that. But being able to action the data that we collect from about our customers and on a daily basis, and being able to give the end users that information definitely has provided us with some really valuable insight. So again, one stat, I hadn't prepared any, probably should have, but one stat I know from the top of my head is things like, we've been able to generate over £1 million worth of kind of like we call them data qualified leads. So actually using machine learning and data to be able to say, hey, these customers will probably be interested in purchasing these products. So if you haven't already spoken to them about that, by the way, here's loads of leads. And that's based on our huge amount of data that we have on our customers already, about what the kind of things that they would interact with on a daily basis, the kind of things they look out, even things from through from the website, campaigns they've interacted with, to looking at the kind of demographic and understanding of what other customers who are similar in the same sector might be interested in as well. So using the data that sits across all those applications is really key to be able to drive that value. And again, being able to pump a lot of that information back into Salesforce and surface that and make it actionable for the end user is a key point of that. It's great having all that data, but how do you use it? And again, it's just about making sure that we can give our end users the information they need to be able to go, right, oh, hey, I can go to that and I can see that they might be interested in this, or, they might be at high risk of churn for some reason. They might have a high impact open case with us, and therefore we need to be aware of that, so we're not actually treading on each other's toes and working. So there's definitely been a huge shift in that, about how we use the data, which is giving us a lot of valuable output.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like obviously you guys have done some really, really cool stuff over the last few years. Despite that, is there anything sort of on reflection, sort of going back to day one, Alastair, at Access, that sort of significantly that you sort of do differently if you had your time again?
I think and this isn't me saying everything we've done is perfect for sure. I think sometimes the way in which anyone approaches a project needs to be, I don't want to say restrained, but kind of controlled, right? So uh, it isn't just naturally a CPQ thing, but I have seen it because I've implemented CPQ in 3 different places now. Is actually, it always sounds simpler than it is going to be. I know that sounds, but it always sounds like, and actually being able to get resource that properly internally. If you're using a partner, for example, make sure that you're not just going off and going, "Hey, partner, off you go. Work this out, fix it. It's fine," kind of thing. I think taking a step back and really understanding that problem, what are you trying to solve before you go off and just do it, is a key one. And I think that's, I don't want to say we like rush into things, because it's not. I wouldn't say it's a rush. It's more probably an excitement of what the benefit can give, right? And you kind of go in all guns blazing and off you go without necessarily doing your due diligence on things. So, CPQ are in a very good place with it now. I'd say we probably started that program 6 months too early. If I'm being honest, I think we probably needed to do a bit more work up front to really understand our landscape, our contract book, the state of our stock data, and really understanding what we sell and how we sell it, and those propositions is a key thing. But we're definitely there now. It's been a path to get there. And also then touching on just the delivery model of those things. If you're using a partner, and that's a perfectly acceptable way to do it, make sure that you've chosen a partner that's got very good understanding and has got, actually, again, examples of where they've done that before in a similar industry and output of what you're looking for. For us, I think it's really key that when we speak to partners, that's a really key thing. Like, tell us, we want a reference, we want to understand these people, we want to talk to them, because we want to see what you've delivered for them. Because there's so much variety in the market now in terms of the partners. I think that's a key thing for a business implementing any software, but particularly from the Salesforce side, is just having that comfort that partner's the right partner for you, and you have a good working relationship, and you also give them what they need and they're asking for. Just because you're paying for the service doesn't mean you can't support them as well, because ultimately you're both aiming for the same thing, which is a successful delivery of the project.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, you've given, thanks obviously for all your time over the last sort of 45 minutes or so, and you've given some really great pointers and tips to businesses, probably sort of at a similar point to where you guys were a few years back, or maybe even earlier in your journey. But any other sort of advice that we haven't touched upon that you'd give to businesses sort of looking at Salesforce, or maybe just a digital transformation more broadly?
Any key advice? I think I'm always just looking at our internal team to make sure that what you're trying to deliver can be delivered into the business effectively, right? So it's not so much digital transformation. Again, I know it probably sounds like I'm banging on about it, but that change management and enablement piece is so key. That you can always deliver a great bit of software, but if the business aren't willing to adopt it and enable it, and it's not supported in the right way, then there's almost no point in doing it. So I think for me, any kind of program and workout, that is going to be a major impactful change, because often the technology change drives the business change. We see that all the time. You're driving the process of business improvement just by implementing technology, but that often means a big change for the end users and the business and how they might work. So it's really key to make sure that you bring those people along the journey, you engage them, you get the right people involved, and you make them feel like that they're really able to contribute, and they are contributing. You're giving you the information you need to be able to be successful, but you give them equally back what they need to be successful at the end of it.
Yeah. Is that I don't know, but is that do you have like a dedicated, say, change management sort of resource or process, so to speak, or is that?
So we don't actually. No. I'm not touting for one, but we don't, right? And I think again that's we're probably at an inflection point as a business in terms of the size of business that we are. I've seen obviously businesses a lot larger than us that do have that kind of like change enablement. Now we do have kind of like transformation people who are stepping into that kind of space, but again it's new for Access. That kind of whole large digital transformation was something that could be managed on a much smaller scale with the resources that were there, but now we're a lot bigger and we're doing it more and more frequently. We do need that level of oversight, guidance, and governance on that kind of change agenda. So we do have some people in the business that are doing that, but I'm seeing more and more a need to be able to kind of have a structure around that to say, hey, we're delivering this. It's not just a PM and a project and a technical team delivering it. It might be like a director, a change director, a transformation director, and a team of people who can enable as well to make sure we have that. So yeah, we don't. But let's say, it's something that I think is growing. I think that's we're at that inflection point in size and scale now, where that's more and more need for that kind of resource.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna wrap things up there then, and drag you into another call to talk about this change management that you need to hire. But no, I think that sort of concludes sort of most of what we wanted to cover in this episode. And like I said, thanks again for your time, Alastair. You've given some really great advice and an overview as to what you guys have done and sort of potential sort of tips for businesses sort of going through that journey as well. So thanks so much for joining. This has been episode 4 of the Blazing a Trail podcast.